Before we start this video, large thank you to someone's name I unfortunately cannot pronounce. Thank you for the support, my friend. I appreciate it. Ben, Ali, Marco, Kenneth, Artis, Sigma Male, Brandon, and Kijitel for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hello guys, and today we're going to make it so when our enemy fires an arrow, if we hit them, we'll actually cancel the arrow effect. So if I run right now and I actually hit him, oh, he dodged me. Yeah, you can see there the arrow kind of just like hangs out in the hand right now. So this doesn't look really good, and the bow is still drawn. We don't want that. We want it so whenever we hit the enemy while they're drawing an arrow, it's going to basically just notch the bow, or release it, sorry, and it cancels the effect. So, also, we're going to remake the backstabbing and reposting, as was a popular request, because I mentioned that in my other project, I do it without colliders, and it's a bit more accurate, and I find it's a lot nicer. So we're going to begin refactoring backstabbing too, and we need to do this anyway, so it will be able to be supported by our AI, so they can backstab us as a player. So first, let's go into the character effects manager, and let's make a public virtual void called interrupt effect. And this is going to be used whenever you're trying to do something like drink an Estus or consume something, or you have an arrow drawn, because basically there's always an instantiated model. We can actually rename this to current effect instead of current range effect. Actually, I'll just call it, you can call it current or just instantiated model or effects model for a better name. Think of like when you're drinking an Estus, the Estus pops up in your hand, and etc., etc. So basically, if the instantiated effects model is not equal to null, the first thing we want to do during an effect is to just destroy that model, because we're canceling it. We want to stop them from drinking the Estus or having the arrow notched. And then that takes care of that bit. Now let's make a specific bit of code for archers specifically. So we're going to say if character dot is holding an arrow. Well, we know if they're holding an arrow, that means they're two-handing the weapon, which means they're using the right hand, which means the weapon is in the right hand. So what we want to do is first say character is holding arrow is equal to false. And then, actually, we want to set the animator. Character.animator.setBool is holding arrow to false, because that is how the character manager is going to pick it up, by getting it from the animator. And after we do that, what we want to do then is just say animator, like a variable animator. We're going to call it ranged weapon animator is equal to, and since we know this has to be in the right hand because we can only two-hand right-handed weapons, we're going to say character dot character effects manager. Whoops, sorry, not character effects manager. Character weapon slot manager dot we right-hand slot, because we're looking for the model on the weapon itself. So we would just go down to the right-hand slot dot current weapon model dot get component and children, the animator component. Now, we need to basically make sure we play the fire animation as if the bow is letting go of tension. So we're going to say if range weapon animator does not equal null. Well, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to make sure that we set the is holding arrow or has arrow drawn to false. And then we're going to want to play the animation to actually fire the ranged weapon. So first, I'm going to say ranged weapon animator dot set bool. Then we're going to say is drawn to false. And then immediately after, let's play the ranged weapon animator.play. And mine is called bow underscore two-hand underscore fire 01. You just play whatever yours is called. And that will make the weapon just shoot. Alright, so then we're going to say if character dot is aiming. And this one really only applies for our player model. We want to take us out of the aiming state. Character.animator.setBool is aiming is equal to false. And again, right now this only applies to the player, that aspect of the code anyway. So let's save that, and that is actually good. I'm just gonna make a note here. Can be used to destroy effects models, so drinking Estus, for example, or having an arrow drawn, because this variable will actually just house the temporary effect of performing an action. Like drinking Estus would be the Estus flask. Loading an arrow will be the arrow model itself. Eating a consumable will be the consumable model itself, etc., etc. And then I'm going to say fires the character's bow and removes the arrow if they are currently holding an arrow. It's always nice to keep it commented, just so in the future we come back to it, we know exactly what this does. And we're going to say removes the player from the aiming state if they are currently aiming. Alright, so now we need to call this wherever we have a damage collider colliding with a character, because, or if wherever you want it to interrupt the effect. So just go to your damage collider base class and on trigger enter. Call it right before you calculate the damage. So I'm going to scroll down here, and right there where it says deals damage, or right above that rather if you want, just say enemy effects dot interrupt effect. So I'm just going to put mine, so reading this, make sure. Yeah, I'm going to put it right down here, right above, or right below, sorry, where we play the blood splatter effects. So enemy effects manager dot interrupt effect. And this will effectively just stop the player, or the enemy rather, from aiming a bow. And will just take away their drawn arrow if they're in the middle of aiming at us as a target. So if I go into the game now, you can see I can hit them, and boom, the arrow goes. But we have a problem. They're walking forward. Why is that? Well, it looks like they're stuck in a state. And why are they stuck in a state? Well, because they went to the attack state, but now they no longer have an arrow. So if they no longer have an arrow, they're just going to be locked into infinity because they can't fire it and they can't perform an attack and leave. So go to your attack state humanoid, specifically on the process archer combat style. Make an if statement after the is interacting. Honestly, you can put it before too if you'd like. If the enemy is not holding an arrow, return to the combat stand state, and then you should be fine. And this will break that cycle of being locked in the attack state forever, because if we don't have an arrow to fire, we just go back and get an arrow. And make sure you type reset state flags before you return to the combat stand state. That's important. Now, if I go in and I hit him, the arrow is gone, and he will load up another arrow, and he'll try to shoot me again. If I cancel this again and I hit him, the arrow is gone, and he'll load up another arrow, and he'll try to shoot me again, and all is working as intended. Very, very nice. All right, so now let's begin we'll start off with just the backstab in this video. I will try to get to the riposte, but I think this is going to run us at least 25 minutes, so if not, we'll have to get to that in the next one. I wanted to get riposting characters done today from the AI, but, you know. Let's delete the backstab and riposte colliders, and let's get rid of this critical damage collider script. We don't need it anymore, so you can just delete that from the project. Yeah, like I said, I wanted to get riposting the player done today from the AI, but people really wanted this refactor. So this actually works out nicer anyway, because this refactor that I'm going to add into the game, it's much easier to allow the AI to perform a riposte or a backstab with this new logic. I would even go as far as to say that the player and the AI can pretty much share identical logic for performing riposte and backstabs. So wherever you had the critical damage collider script, just erase that. It's going to give you a few errors. Again, delete the script. It is no longer needed in the project. We're going to handle backstabbing and riposting without having to detect a collider on someone's back or front. We're actually going to do it by using a dot calculation, the same way we handle blocking, which means if you're behind the enemy, they will know using a dot calculation, which is a lot cleaner, and you just don't need a whole other collider on your character. I like it a lot more. So we also don't need the riposte and backstab layers. You can delete those. They don't serve a purpose anymore in the project currently. And then we're going to go down here to attempt a backstab or a riposte. I'm going to eradicate the whole function. We don't need anything from this. It's going to be a lot cleaner than this, a lot smaller than this. We're going to separate it into a couple separate functions. So the first thing we're doing here in attempt, backstab, or riposte is we're deciding whether or not we're going to go for a backstab or a riposte, depending on where we are in respect to our target. So this is quite simple. We need to say if character is interacting, return, obviously, and if the character has no stamina, return. We only want to be able to perform a backstab or riposte if our character has stamina. So I'm going to say if character stats manager current stamina is less than or equal to 0, then return. I know I'm going quite fast, but I almost have to, because if not, this video would be an hour. So if you need to, just slow down and rewatch some aspects. I'm just going to keep talking at the speed. So let's make a raycast hit variable, call it hit. All right, let's scroll down a bit, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check for if physics dot raycast, and let's make this start at the character dot critical raycast start point dot transform dot position. Now this should be up towards your character's chest, otherwise you're going to fire this raycast on the ground. This is not going to work out very well, so make sure that is in the proper position. All right, we're going to start it there, and then we're going to make it go out from the character transform direction. We're going to open up and say vector3.forward. Okay? And then we're going to go out and use our hit variable. And we're going to make a comma, and we're going to put this on the character layer at a distance of 0.7f. And you know what? I'm actually going to make a variable for that. This distance here is basically how close you need to be before you can actually backstab or riposte somebody. So you can play around the values if you want. I'm just using 0.7. That's honestly something I thought about at the top of my head. And then I'm going to make this only cast in the character layer. So let's first change the 0.7 to, I'll call this critical attack range. And again, this is how close you need to be to the opponent's back or their chest to riposte or backstab them. So the smaller the number, the closer you need to be. If it's too small, obviously you won't be able to do it regardless, because you'll need to be basically inside of them. So let's make a float. I'm actually going to keep it public, not serialized, because that's just the convention I'm using for this whole series. I don't think I'm going to change it now. So public float, use serialized field if you want to, though. Critical attack range is equal to 0.7f. Okay. And then up here, let's make a public layer mask. Going to call this character layer. And as that suggests, this is the layer that all of our characters should be on. So every time you make a character, and whether it be an enemy or a player, they should have this layer assigned to them. All right, so now going into the game here, let's check a few things before we continue just to make sure this is all set up right. So let's go over to our enemy. Going to go down here and I'm going to open up the enemy manager, assign this character layer to character, enemy combat manager rather. Do the same thing to your player. Go to your player, go to the combat manager, and make sure that layer is assigned to character. Now, if you want to, you can make it so on awake, this layer auto assigns itself using code, but be aware if you do that and you change the order of the layers, you'll have to change that too. Please don't forget that. So now let's go over into the attempt, backstab, or riposte functionality. Let's make a variable of type character manager. I'm going to call it enemy character, as in the enemy we are attempting to backstab or riposte. I'm going to assign that as equaling to hit, as in raycast hit, .transform.getComponent character manager. So if the raycast hits something on the character layer, it's going to then search that for a component of character manager, which yes, it should always find. Next, let's go to let's create a vector3 variable. Call this variable direction from character to enemy, as in the enemy we're backstabbing, from the character that is performing this action. This is going to equal transform.position minus enemy character.transform.position. Then let's make a float and call this dot value. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. This is how we did blocking as well. We're going to say equals vector3 dot, and we're going to pass in our direction from character to enemy. And then we're going to pass in our enemy character dot transform dot forward. Okay? And now, just like the blocking calculation, we're going to do two here, though. Let's debug it so we can always see our dot value. We can check this in game then by holding RB if you have the critical attack item action assigned to your weapon. I'm going to say current dot value is, I'm going to say plus dot value. Now, let's go down and let's open up an if statement here. We're going to say if character dot can be riposted. And then we're going to check for the proper dot value. If dot value is less than or equal to 1.2f. I'm just using the values I use from Nephilim here now. And dot value is greater or equal than, and I have the 0.6f, then let's perform or attempt to perform the riposte. And again, you can play around these values. Yours might be different than mine. I am just using the values I had set up in the prototype in Nephilim. So feel free to play around with this. In fact, I encourage you to do so. It will probably be different for most people, at least by a little bit, but it should generally be somewhat the same. If dot value is greater or equal than minus 0.7 and dot value is less than or equal to minus 0.6f, then what we're going to do is basically attempt a backstab. Okay? Now, let's actually write the code for attempting a backstab, but first let's check on a couple things. Let's make sure we have our critical attack raycast start point dragged in. That is very important. And now I'm just going to show you actually by going into the game what happens if I go up to the enemy now and I hold RB with a weapon that has the critical attack action assigned to holding RB. So click my sword here, I'll show you. If I go over to the inspector, you can see that the hold RB action is the critical attack action. So let's go up behind this gentleman and let's hold the RB attack. And we get our dot value popping up. So you can see the current dot value is blank. So you can use this to gauge what dot value you should use when checking for a backstab. So again, play around with it if you want and just use what you find is good. Make it whatever you want to make it. So I'm going to go back into the code here now and let's actually write the functionality for attempting a backstab itself. So we're going to need to pass the raycast hit variable because we need to know what we're hitting. And I'm just going to change this to lowercase because we don't typically write our functions in all caps. Okay, and then I'm going to erase this these comment markers here. Now let's make the actual function. So I'm going to make this a public, or rather a private void for attempt backstab. And now let's make it past our raycast hit variable, call that hit. Now what needs to happen during a backstab? And remember, this is from the perspective of the attacker. This is attempting a backstab, so this is from the perspective of the person performing it. So let's say character manager, and we're going to have enemy character, as in the enemy being backstabbed. It's going to equal to hit.transform.getComponent character manager. Again, I suppose you could also pass the character manager we got from attempting backstab riposte. Feel free to do that if you want. You can change this to your liking. So I'm just going to go down here, and apparently the character manager is not in the autofill, so I'll type it out myself. There we go. All right, now from there, let's actually make these characters perform some animations and pass some damage values. So what I'm going to do is if enemy character does not equal null, then I'm going to say if enemy character is not being backstabbed or reposted already. This is important. We didn't do this last time. We don't want to be able to backstab or repost a character that is already having it done. These bools aren't made yet, so just put down is being backstabbed and is being reposted, or is not rather, so add the exclamation point. And then let's add these to the character manager base class script. So shooting over to the character manager under combat flags, very simple. Let's make two bools, is being backstabbed and is being reposted. And then on the animator manager, the animator window under reset animator bool, we can actually reset these every time we get back to the empty animation state. So when the animation is done being performed, it always goes back to empty, as you know. So right here, the backstab animation goes back into this, which triggers this script because it's on this on-state enter logic. And then every time the animation is completed, let's just reset is being reposted and is being backstabbed and set them to false right here. All right, so that is fine. Now let's proceed with more of the backstabbing logic. Let's go over here now into this if statement, and let's write down, well, we want to say enable is invulnerable. And this is a function we haven't made yet, but we're going to make that right now. Why do we want to do that? Well, we don't want the gentleman who's being backstabbed or reposted to be able to take damage from people swinging a sword at them or a monster jumping at them. So we make the person being backstabbed or reposted invulnerable. This is obviously optional. This is how Dark Souls does it. If you want the person being backstabbed to be able to take additional damage from stuff around them, then go for it. That's cool. Just don't include this bit. It's very simple, the code, because remember, we handle it the same way we do with rolling invulnerability. We just do it via an animation event and change a bool. But right now, we're just going to make them invulnerable right away. No animation event needed. So all we need to do is say animator or character.animator.setBool is invulnerable is equal to true. And then when this animation is done being played, it will go back to being false because when we enter the empty state, invulnerable is set to false again. All right, so that is good. Let's save that. Let's go below this. And then we're going to say character, as in the character performing this action. Let's make a bool for is performing backstab or repose as well, just in case in the future. We are going to need those further down the line, so I'll just do that right now. So we're going to say is performing backstab and is performing repost. And then likewise put those on the reset animator bool script where you go back to the empty state and you reset the flags. Let's add them both here as well. So we're going to say is being reposted, is being performing backstab. How are we doing on time right now? Okay, so yeah, I thought this will be at least 25 minutes. Looks like it might be around maybe 30. So I'm going to say character.is performing backstab is equal to true. And next, let's go right below that and let's say character animator manager dot erase hand IK for weapon. So if you have any hand IK active, it shuts it off while performing this animation. And then we're going to want to just play the backstab animation. So character animator manager dot play target animation and then putting your backstab animation. Now, in my other game, mine and Rob's project, we have a system that plays a different backstab animation for different weapons depending on the class. So if you have that in your game where you're assigning different actions depending on the weapon, place that in here or create the logic to do so. I'm just going to put in this one animation for now because this is all we're doing for the sake of the tutorial. Then let's make a float for the critical damage that we're going to perform during the backstab. And what you want to do is, again, arbitrary numbers here. You can make your own formulas if you want, but I'm going to say the right weapon's critical damage modifier, so character.characterinventory.rightweapon, times, and then put brackets, all the damage accumulated from the weapon. So physical damage, plus its fire damage, plus its magical damage, plus its lightning damage. I'm not going to type out all the damages because, again, if you know how to do one, you know how to do them all. I just want to show you how to do this in concept. So I'll just add one more just to show you. We'll say fire damage. So we'll make sure you put it in brackets because you're adding the physical and the fire damage and then multiplying the product of that by the critical damage multiplier, effectively multiplying all the damage. Now, like I said, this is just one way to do it. There's a billion ways to do it. I encourage you all to write your own damage formulas. And you know that comes down to testing and balancing in whatever way you want it to perform or look. So this is fine the way it is with just physical and fire damage. I think that's the only two damage types we use for the sake of this tutorial anyway right now. Yes, it is. Okay, so I will erase this. There we go. And that's good. Now we want to assign this damage. So we need to make a variable for pending damage. But first I'm going to round this because our health uses integers, not floats. So I will say int round critical damage equals math f.round to int our critical damage. And then we're going to say enemy character dot combat manager dot pending damage is equal to the rounded critical damage. Now, pending damage, what is that? So we're going to assign this damage via an animation event, just like we did before. We're going to store that damage on a variable called pending damage. So let's make that right now. We don't have it. I thought we did. I guess we did it some other way in the past. Backstabbing in the past was eons ago. So let's make a public float pending critical damage. And then we're going to make a function to actually assign that damage. So let's do that next. Actually, first come right here and let's make our enemy play their backstab animation. So enemy character animator manager play target animation. Whatever their backstab animation is, true because they are interacting. Let's save that now. Okay, so that looks good. Just checking this over real quick. Look at my notes. Yes, that's good. That's covered. Okay, next, come down below here and we're going to say enemy character character combat manager, and we're going to say dot get backstabbed. And you're asking me, Seb, why are we making a function for get backstabbed? Well, because right now, yeah, they do play the animation, but we want to lock it so this character is always in a specific position in respect to the person who's backstabbing them. That way you're not like looking away from them while they're being backstabbed. You don't get those weird artifacts. I want them to line up, basically. So, again, feel free to tweak whatever numbers I'm putting up here now. I'm just going to show you the functionality and what works for my project specifically. So let's make a function called get backstabbed. Okay, and then the first thing we're going to do in here, in the function get backstabbed, is we're going to want to pass a character manager of the person who's doing the backstabbing. So I'm just going to say variable of type character manager, and I'm going to say character performing the backstab. I want to make this as easy to read as possible because there's a lot of character manager variables being thrown around, one for the backstabby, one for the backstabber. This just makes it easy to read. So we need the character performing the backstab, and what we want to do, we want to play some sound effects first. If you have it, insert it here now. Good place to do it, or you can use an animation event, all up to you. Then we're going to say character.isBeingBackstabbed is equal to true, as in this character, because this is from the perspective now, get backstabbed, of the character being backstabbed. Then we want to force lock our position, so we align with the person backstabbing this character. So let's actually move this animation from there now, from attempt backstab to here, where the backstab E is getting backstabbed. And instead of enemy character, it's just character, because again, this function is from the perspective of the person getting backstabbed. And then down here, we pass character under get backstabbed. I hope this all makes sense. One of these functions is from the perspective of the backstabber. One is from the perspective of the backstabby. So next, let's make an I enumerator up here called force move character to enemy backstab position. That is a mouthful, but that's the best way to write it because I think that makes the most sense and is the most clear. Let's make a variable of character manager and call it character performing backstab because again, that's what we need. And we want to move our person being backstabbed to the character performing the backstab. You can do it the other way if you want, in reverse, where you move the character backstabbing to the enemy being backstabbed, whatever you think is best for your project. I'm just doing it this way. Both ways are equally valid. Let's make a for loop, and I'm going to change float. I'm going to say float timer is equal to 0.05f. If timer is less, then I'm going to say, again, 0.05f. I'm going to say timer equals timer plus 0.05f. Change these numbers all you want. I find this works fine. This is why I'm using it. This is what I prototyped it as, and it looks nice on my project. Play around with it if you'd like. So inside of this, I'm going to say quaternion backstab rotation is equal to quaternion.look rotation. And then I'm going to pass the character performing the backstab dot. Now, there's where we need a variable we haven't made yet. We're going to want dot transform dot forward. And then right below this, we're going to say transform dot rotation is equal to quaternion slurp between the transform dot rotation and the backstab rotation over a time of, I'll just say 1. You can make it variable for that time if you'd like. Then I'm going to say transform.parent is equal to, and here's where we're going to need this variable. We're going to need the character performing backstab receiver transform. And what is this? Well, this is a position. I'm going to put this under the character combat manager, by the way, .backstab receiver transform. This is a position on the person who's performing a backstab that we want to pull the backstabby into. And this, in my experience so far, has been the best way I found to do it. You can use math to calculate the position yourself. That way you don't have to hard save a transform. That's fine too. I just like hard saving a transform because then depending on the creature, I can tweak it. So I'm going to make a header for combat transforms. Going to make a public transform backstab receiver transform. And let's save that. Okay, now let's actually probably spelled that wrong, so I'm just going to put that right there. Excellent. And now I'm going to come right below that and say transform.local, it's important, local position is equal to vector3.0. We're probably going to change that in a second, though. I just need to test it real quick. Transform.parent is equal to null, and the order is very important there, okay? Debug.log, I'm just going to make sure this fires by saying coroutine, or just put in anything here if you want. I'm only doing this for my sake. You don't need to put it here. I'm just making sure this is running correctly. Running coroutine, and then I'm going to use the coroutine end syntax where you yield return null new wait for seconds 0.05f. Okay, so now I will save this, and we'll finish putting in the logic first. Let's call the coroutine right here under get backstabbed, where it's force lock position. Start coroutine force move character to enemy backstab position. And let's pass the character performing the backstab. So this looks good so far. We haven't passed the pending damage yet, but I'm going to go into the project now, and I'm going to make an empty game object called combat transforms, and it looks like actually I already have that, so never mind, delete that. Go to combat transforms. Going to rename this old one backstabber standing point. Cool. Looks like we had something similar here in the past. I remember now, actually. Going to move that to in front of our player, because now it's the backstab receiver point. And I'm going to drag that into the variable under the combat manager. Okay. So again, play around with this position too, because it might be different depending on, your animations, and just don't be afraid to mess around with it. I'm going to change vector 3.0 to character performing backstab.combatmanager.backstabber receiver transform.local position. That way it always locks the character to this position in case there's some weird movement trying to happen, and that should be fine. And now if I save this and go into the game, I think it will work right now as it is, just reading this over. Right, let's do the assign critical damage first. Public void.apply pending damage. And then let's just say our enemy here, we're being backstabbed. Character stat manager dot take damage user. What did I call this function? It's with no animation. What did I call that? Okay, let me check. All right, so yeah, the function I'm looking for is actually called take damage no animation. And we have our pending damage, which we're going to pass as physical, and then 0 for fire. If you want to, you can pass these as separate damage values. It's not that hard to do. I won't do that because, again, I'm just doing this to show you the sake of the concept itself, or the state of the concept itself. So let's go up here now, and let's make a variable. Let's change this to an int, not a float. Pending damage is supposed to be an integer, and we're good to go. Now, if we save that, let's go to the actual animation itself and make sure we're calling that function on the animation event. So go to Window with your player highlighted animation, go to the backstabbed animation, and right where you want the animation to happen, I have an animation event here already from the last one. We're going to say this one was called Take Critical Damage Animation Event. I think I just called this Take Critical Damage. What did I call that? Let's go down. Yes, Apply Pending Damage. Okay, so right there is where we're going to get the damage. Now, if I go into the game and start, I'm going to try to backstab this character, and it should work just fine. So let's go over here now. Let's run into the room. Go up, hold E. And that works fine. Cool. Awesome. Now I'm going to try this a couple more times just to make sure that wasn't, not a fluke, but I want to make sure it looks solid. You can play around the values and change it if it's not sliding to the right position. For example, like the transform, you want to, change that yourself. Going to run over and backstab them. Yes, that looks awesome to me. I like that a whole lot. Honestly, you could tweak it, make it look even a little bit tighter, but for the sake of the video, that's fine. Now I want to make sure I can backstab them while I'm moving around them and it doesn't look weird. So I'm going to get their attention now and run around them in circles and just try to backstab and see how it looks. So I'm just going to go around in circles. Okay, can't do it from far away. Good, that works. That works. And yeah, that is perfect. And they lock in the right position. They look forward. That looks a lot nicer than it was before too, just because now their rotation is locked properly. We still have to fix that arrow, but again, we're out of time right now, so we'll make it so that the arrow is actually sticking to the limbs of the player, and we're going to make it so we refactor the parry in the next video. Hopefully we can fit all that in one video. As usual, guys, thank you so much for watching. I know the videos have been a bit longer recently, but it is the nature of these topics. I would appreciate it very much if you drop a like and leave a comment. It genuinely helps out my series so much, and a special thank you to the Patreon homies. Seriously, it's because of you guys I get to keep doing this, and I appreciate each and every one of you so much. I will see you all in the next video.